Wow, that's probably the best question I've ever had. I would say because Chris Kleiman and I stayed in touch when I was gone, and he was aware of the things that I was learning and the things that we were doing. From whether it's no huddle, some tempo things, just getting exposure to those things, right? Yeah. You can help the deep if you understand that.
Welcome to this week's episode of Inside the Headset, presented by CoachComm. This week, we sit down with North Dakota State head coach Tim Polasek. In this conversation, Coach Polasek discusses his early days in the profession, how he has found ways to improve in the midst of success, and his journey to becoming the head coach at NDSU. But first, a word from CoachComm.
Deuce left, check with me. If they're in quarters match, we're going to Pittsburgh or Ohio.
They're in zero.
Let's go Hippo, Seattle, wide choice. If we call the protection right, it's 6.
When a play call is the difference between winning and losing, your headset choice could be your most important decision. When the call counts, CoachComm is the only choice for clear, dependable communication. Visit CoachComm.com for more info.
We got it, guys. Good job.
Follow Inside the Headset on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to our YouTube channel for exclusive content. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like and leave a review. It really helps others discover the show. We drop new episodes every week, so hit that follow button and never miss a moment. Now, let's get inside the headset with Coach Polasek.
Coach, how we doing?
Everything's good, man. We're on spring break and really looking forward to the next week. We start what we call is like our OTAs or our lead up to spring practice, which is kind of interesting. Coach Bohl jumping on and saying hi. We've tried to maintain pretty much the same chunks of time going all the way back to when, he was leading this program. And so it's exciting, right, to see all the work from the winter that our young guys, we're a developmental program. So I can't wait to see how much those guys have grown and how much we've gotten better.
Absolutely, Coach. Well, I tell you what, over the years, it's been pretty cool for me, especially being a Southern guy. I never spent much time kind of in that direction, and just the opportunity to kind of work with Coach Bohl here, podcast with Coach Kleiman. I've gotten real tight with Coach Braun, David Braun, and Tyler Rowland. Just that network of coaches that come through North Dakota State is just unbelievable, and it just seems like something special whenever you get to walk those halls and put a whistle on that staff, man. Good things tend to happen.
Yeah, it's the Division I era gets a lot of attention now, like it should.
Right.
But too often, I try to take advantage of every opportunity I can to. A lot of programs are, will say things like recruiting is the lifeblood of the program. For us, I never wanted to look at it like that when I got to North Dakota State or got back. It's so much about the former coaches, the Division II era, the former players that have laid down, the standard and trying to elevate that standard, but really not, always being respectful of what they've done and playing to the standard that they've set.
Yeah.
And so there's been a lot of great people that have walked on campus here and have done good things for North Dakota State, and then obviously taken advantage, and created and cultivated a career for themselves. It's pretty special to be in this spot. A lot of tradition here of good people.
That's right. And well, you've certainly put your stamp on the program in many different ways as an assistant, as a coordinator, and as a head coach. But let's take it way back, man. Let's take it back to all-time leading passer, single game and career records for TD passes, passing yards, completion percentage, 2000 Conference Player of the Year, back in the day there at Old Concordia University up in Wisconsin. Obviously, this game is special, and when you have the opportunity to go and continue to do it as long as you can do it, had the opportunity to do it at the collegiate level. What was it about the game that led you to want to be a ball coach?
It's interesting. I grew up in a small town, so kind of was fortunate to, sports and youth sports have gotten so competitive, and kids are having to make decisions earlier. When, you come from a small town, you're able to play all three sports. I really gravitated towards my physical education teacher. He's the one that early, sophomore, junior year kind of started painting a path for me that I didn't have the vision on myself, and I always was, in the mindset that I would be a phys teacher. I would coach basketball and football or do as much as possible. And then Quite frankly, I'm so appreciative of Mike Bartholomew, who coaches at Lutheran High School now in Vegas, because he just never stopped recruiting me. I was actually committed to Lakeland, but there was a burning desire to want to get in touch and get in contact with my father, who I didn't grow up with. That's why I look at Coach Bohl in so many ways as a father figure for me. He really was. And then, so when I got to Concordia, those coaches, and even with some coaching change, it was just all positive, right? And as soon as I was done with my student teaching, I knew I had to make some things happen quickly, right? You're getting into your career, and you got to either get on the right path or you got to go to work. But it was pretty evident probably, I was probably 15 or 16 when I knew I wanted to coach. I just didn't know it was going to be college until I was 18 or 19 years old, and I was starting to get into some philosophy things with my teaching degree. And at that point, it was pretty crystal clear to me. You know, I've always been kind of an intense guy and an enthusiastic guy. And you know, I coached some high school football for 1 year when I was student teaching. It was fun. Had a great time, but I just, something about the intensity level of not only coaching football and teaching, but I really like the competitive spirit that comes along with recruiting.
Yeah.
And so at that time, that's when I jumped into it.
And typically that's the hardest part of this whole deal. It's just kind of kicking through the door and getting the ball rolling, especially when you don't have that experience. So what was it like for you to get that first job there at Wisconsin Stevens Point? How did you get your career going?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I look back on it now, and you know, the struggle of keeping young coaches on the path. You know, it takes time. It's tough. Heck, I look back on it now, and I'm trying to figure out how I did it. I'm here to, you know, I'm going to be honest with you guys, and my story is kind of unique. It's really cool, but everybody's is, and everybody's path is a little bit different. But after student teaching, I basically went and knocked on the door of John Mish, you know, and I want to get into this profession. I'm here in Iola, Wisconsin. It's 20 minutes away. I can volunteer. I want to go in full steam ahead. What do you have for me? In short terms, you know, John was like, Coach Mish was like, I really don't have anything. And then I think he probably made a couple calls, you know, to Bill Young, who's been instrumental in my development. You know, I think he's got 400 plus wins at Catholic Memorial. You know, he coached J.C. Latham, 45 Division I guys. Wisconsin program there was awesome. And so what occurred was, you know, as a Division III coach and being part-time, two things happened. I was going for my master's in your coaching, but you also might have a side job, or you might also have some things going on to pay the bills. So every off season, I actually had a really good family friend that, you know, allowed me to help out in the logging world. So I became a lumberjack in the winter times. And I was doing that, you know, for 2-3 months while, you know, 2 days a week I was recruiting, 3 days a week I was logging, or vice versa. And really difficult times. I mean, I didn't grow up with, you know, a big financial package from my family or from my mom. And so just kind of working at it, trying to stay alive, right? But at the same point, I was back home and I was able to kind of be around family and do some things that I like to do while cultivating this path of wanting to be a college coach. So then I was in my third season. I think it was February, and Coach Bohl, you know, had gotten a recommendation from Todd Wash, who's in the NFL now as well. And he got that recommendation through some high school coaches who were impressed with the amount of time I would spend with them on football or in recruiting. And Coach called and, you know, said, Tim, we want to bring you out here. And long story short, when he made the phone call, it was at the end of the day. I think it was a Friday. I had opened up a beverage of choice, you know, a Busch Light. And Coach kind of said, well, when can you be up here? And I said, well, how long does it take to get to Fargo? And he said 8 hours. And I said, I can be there in 8.5. And so we set the meeting up on Monday. So I was able to come up here and interview. And actually the office that I'm in right now was only about 3/4 done. So we were moving from our old facility into the Fargo Dome renovations of the offices. Really, really pretty interesting, because when I came back out here after I accepted the job, the superintendent of my high school actually bought my driver. So I had some cash to get out here, because I was pretty much dead broke. I slept in the Fargo Dome for about 4 or 5 months until they kicked me out. And then I had to get an apartment. My first job at NDSU was $6,000. It was coaching the running backs and doing all the offensive GA work. And so in my first 4 years of coaching college football, I always tell people, along with logging, I made about $20,000 total. And thank God for good people in my community back home that were supportive of me. And then once I got to NDSU, I knew that I had a lot of work to do. And so just being in the office and staying in the office and getting around all these great coaches, Pat Perlis with the offensive line, Brent Vegan with the quarterbacks, getting around all those guys and just totally committing to it was awesome, because from that point on, the next 3 years, I gained more responsibility and obviously a little bit more change in my pocket. And I'll always be so grateful for Coach Bohl and his leadership, of rewarding me in small incremental ways that kept me excited about the profession. And that's kind of how I got my start, which led to a lot of big things, or, some things that, really allowed me to get to this point where you cultivate philosophy, approach, recruiting styles, teaching styles. And Craig was a big part of that.
Yeah. What a way to get rolling. And I think, especially when you sit in the seat that you sit in now, it's easy to forget about those humble beginnings, about not having change in your pocket and probably the amount of work that you were putting in. One thing that stood out to me in those first couple of years in your profession, you were wide receivers, tight ends, defensive backs, and running backs all early in your career. And I know how it goes. Sometimes all that stuff is not by choice, but how helpful was it for you to have that exposure to these different positions? And then once again, I did the small coaching jobs before where it wasn't just that. I was also cutting the fields, doing the laundry, doing this. How good was it to have all that experience so early in your career?
Two things. I'll kind of focus on two things. Number one, being at the Division III level as a player and as a coach, you learn quickly, right? Like, those guys are in the business for the right reason.
Yeah.
I mean, I still remember the head coach there stuffing all the recruiting envelopes, helping them with that, late hours. He built the lockers in the locker room, so all the little things that you do just because you do care so much about the person, the player, the student athlete's experience, right? And then I'm so appreciative of the opportunities I got. I don't want to say like necessarily the ability to coach all the positions, but the first spring I coached quarterbacks at Stevens Point, and that was natural. I mean, that felt good because I played the position, so you could take anything that you learn and you could believe in it. You could put that on people. But then coaching the receivers and the tight ends, getting involved in some special teams, making a lot of mistakes on special teams, actually, really learning from those things. Now, we were solid, but, we were doing some things that you had to go out and clinic with coaches. And then from there, I actually had 1 year of defense, at UW Stevens Point. That was probably the number one most critical learning experience that I had. I had to really coach, I had to be tight in boxes, technique and fundamentals. Yeah. I didn't play the position. I didn't know it. I remember getting down to Madison and visiting with those guys and being like, holy smokes, how am I going to coach this? And the guy there kept reiterating, just, keep the fundamentals and the technique tight, master something. And then you move forward, coming to NDSU and back with the running or getting with the running backs, pass protection and learning pass protection and in the check down game and keeping that room inspired when you have multiple good players, right? So early on in my career, I was really, really fortunate to have some really good learning opportunities. And then by the time I got done with the University of Iowa, coaching there, I coached every position on offense.
Yeah. And
man, it forces you to look at the game and see the game of football from a big picture standpoint. And not everybody has the opportunity or gets the opportunity to learn and grow that way. And that's been so beneficial, right along with building relationships. The special teams was critical. I mean, that was so helpful for me to learn and to understand, every position group and to get to know those kids and to be there for Coach Bohl as far as gathering information of what's the temperature of the team. The special teams guy has to have a great feel for that.
Oh, yeah.
And I really enjoyed my time as a special teams coordinator. And then to wrap it up, prior to being the head coach here, getting to be with Coach Bohl on the back end at Wyoming and getting back with the cornerbacks was just fascinating. I really do feel really strongly about, our perspective of how to attack offensive install, of how to attack everything we do offensively from the quarterback's viewpoint. That's probably something that I made countless mistakes. As coaches, we want to do everything that we like, that we want to do. We like this play. Well, does the quarterback like it, and can he play it?
Yeah,
is what I learned at Wyoming. And so now we're trying to take a little bit of an approach at NDSU. Early on in spring and fall camp, it's all about, you got to run to the ball on defense. You got to get everything in, but it's about the quarterback. And so I've just had some really good mentors, teachers, and I've had unbelievable opportunities to learn and grow in this game to obviously get to this spot. And we're not perfect, but I do like the staff that we put together and where we're at from a philosophy standpoint.
Yeah, and kind of taking it back to that transition to the NDSU the first time. You mentioned sleeping at the Fargo Dome. Just heading down with a bus ticket and a little bit of cash in your pocket. You were able to really grow and develop there. What a special 2006 to 12, about six to 7 years where you were able to kind of walk in as a graduate assistant, continue to elevate yourself from a positional standpoint, and probably, and I won't say more importantly, but great for you in your career early on is to be able to experience that national championship pedigree, culture, all that kind of stuff at the end of that first tenure there to win the championship in 11 and 12. What was it like to be a part of kind of building that thing up and to see it come to fruition, and then ultimately see it multiple times here throughout your career? But in that first stint, how special was that as a young coach?
It was unbelievable, to kind of take you. Okay, 2006 and 7, we had unbelievable football teams that were not eligible for the playoffs.
Yeah.
So Coach Bohl had positioned that thing, with probably half Division II kids, half Division I. We're in this transition, but if you look back at those years, we beat Ball State, we beat Central Michigan, we took Minnesota to the wire, I believe, somewhere in there, and lost by a point. I'm trying to think, I'm missing one. Maybe there's a Kansas win in there. But long story short, it was really interesting because we kind of had stumbled in 2009, and amidst this transition, we weren't perfect and we just had some injury things and we had some things on the team that weren't perfect. But at that moment, Coach Bohl, I thought that was the first time, it takes about 5 or 6 years, I think, to develop philosophy. Like too many coaches, we ask young guys, hey, what's your philosophy on football? What's your your overall, how do you want to attack people on offense? Those kind of things. So 2010, Coach Bohl he really dug his cleats in and was unbelievable leader because at that point we started double repping in practice, 2 fields going on everything all the time. And from a recruiting standpoint, we were just going to go and, harvest our crops every year. And so the things I was able to learn from 06 to 10 really are still the foundation of what carries NDSU football now and who I try to be as a head coach from a schedule standpoint, from a temperament standpoint of what things are important and what things aren't. I kind of got that from Coach Ferentz. It's like, hey, that's a big deal, but not as big as this, and that kind of thing. But early on, moving into like the special team coordinator role, from but running backs in the offensive GA in 06, to all of a sudden being the recruiting coordinator in I think 07 and 08, or getting the camp director job there early, and being forced to kind of work some administrative stuff was all phenomenal. And I think I went from $6,000 to $12,000 to 18, and then
yeah.
So forth and so on. But again, like I'm appreciative of those times because what it forces you to do is, okay, do you want to do this? And if you do, obviously from a financial standpoint, you can't be out there burning up cash because you don't have it.
Yeah.
So you're in the office, you're with the players, you're around the facility. You refuse to lose. You refuse to not reach out to people, not to travel, totally embrace, the learning aspect. But I would just say, Coach Bohl's guidance from 09 to 10, reestablishing how we were going to recruit, reestablishing how we were going to practice. Those are things that have never left me. They are part of my DNA, and without being at NDSU in that early times, I wouldn't be as convicted as I am. And then obviously to see 2011 and 12, we push it through and we win national championships. Home field advantage. If we don't have home field advantage against Georgia Southern, right? Like I don't think we beat those teams. Our fan base was unbelievable in those two games. So that's kind of always been a goal of ours now, is just win home field advantage. If you do that at NDSU, you have a chance, right? And so those years, quite frankly, have been the foundation for this staff that we have now, and has been the foundation for me and everything that I've interviewed on for years.
Yeah. And, the positional stuff, the X and O stuff, talking about that development. Another type of development that you had the opportunity to kind of go through early in your career, especially with the ever-changing kind of things that are going on just from college football in general. You went from D3 non-scholarship to having a little bit of experience in D2. I know you guys were coming out that transition where I think it's like 32, 36 scholarships, something like that. So all of a sudden, the FCS deal where you got, 52, 56, somewhere in there. What were you able to kind of take away from that? Because there's just a lot of people that miss those that humongous part of, the different levels of football. And I think there's a lot to it with roster management and all those kind of buzzwords you're hearing a lot now. But, man, you guys have been doing this, for a long time.
Yeah, actually, I think coaches that kind of start, Division III and kind of move up and specifically get to the FCS level are fortunate, because we've always been, kind of handling a pot of money,
right,
to get 85 guys on scholarship, right? It's much more like a salary cap than it is, okay, here's 85 scholarships.
Yeah.
They're all fulls. You fill out your matrix and how you want to build your football team, whether that's tight end, fullback oriented, or if it's receiver oriented, right? So those numbers, matching up 85 is pretty simple compared to, okay, you've got 63 scholarships to break up for 85 guys. And so now as we go into the NIL world and the collectives, there's a lot of carryover. You got this pot of money, how are you going to disperse it? To keep, number one, for us, the locker room tight,
yeah,
but also how do you reward, your best players or the guys that are doing the best things in the community, the most recognizable guys. And so there was a lot of experience gained. That was more Brent Vegan than anybody in my early years. He was the one that was always in charge of scholarship allocation, the numbers. Is a guy on point, 1-0 scholarship, or is he on 0.78?
Yeah.
Compared to a 93% or 100% scholarship guy, and manufacturing those numbers. And the thing that I appreciate about FCS is that we're able to say, compared to Division II, is, we seem to be able to elevate guys from their second and third year a little bit more,
yeah,
third and fourth year. There's a natural, I've always kind of really appreciated it because there's an earn it factor.
Absolutely.
And that's the one thing that, worries me about recruiting with NIL money or the collective money is, those kids, gosh, this is college football. They're going to go through the biggest transition of their lives, and you still have to earn that logo, at least at our place. You have to earn that logo on the side of your helmet and the stripes down the middle of your helmet. And so those experiences, with kind of helping out and being the recruiting coordinator as far as allocating where coaches would go, our big boards, and then Brent Vegan helping to see kind of the matrix, to the point where I've assigned Grant Olson, our defensive coordinator, you have to have a numbers guy on that stuff. And so that was critical, to see the transition of, okay, where were they at Division II? Where are we going to get fully funded as far as Division I AA or FCS? And then the big picture of being at Iowa or Wyoming, and kind of taking all those experiences and leveraging that for the collective and the NIL now,
yeah,
has really been pretty fascinating.
Well, let's talk about that FBS piece. At this point, you hadn't been at the FBS level. I'm talking about where we are chronologically, right? After 2 national championships, you take the opportunity to step out and go to Northern Illinois for a heck of a run, 12-2 record, MAC championship game, poinsettia bowl appearance. Just from your standpoint, why'd you make this leap, and how did it go down?
No, I mean, that was probably, to this day, still the most difficult, with the 4 or 5 moves that I've had. That was the most difficult conversation, because going in to talk with Coach Bohl about wanting to pursue another opportunity, which I kind of knew was pretty much a wrap with that other school. It wasn't going to be the interview process and that kind of thing. Was really difficult, because I believe so strongly in Coach Bohl and what we had built at North Dakota State, the FCS level. And then on top of that, there were about 27 seniors that were going to be coming back going into 2013, which is arguably NDSU's best football team. 13, 19, or 21. Those are the teams that kind of get compared, I think, I believe, as the best teams ever. That was a really big challenge, because, Coach Bohl just really never wanted to lose people. I mean, he really wanted to develop you. He wanted to stay together as a family and as a staff. I owed him so much. He was a father figure for me. Every single year I was at North Dakota State, 06 to 7, more responsibility, a little more money.
Yeah.
More responsibility, a little more money. I mean, he is the guy that's responsible for my development, along with others. But that was really hard to come into him and say, hey, Coach, I'm going to look at this opportunity at Northern Illinois. I'm basically going to go on campus to not to interview, but to see it. I've asked him if I could do that. We got in kind of the whys and stuff like that. But it was Chris Kleiman that was really impactful at the time. He was on our staff as the D coordinator. And I don't know if Coach Bohl and Chris have ever had this conversation, but Chris said, Tim, you've been here 7 years. It's time, 7 seasons. It's time. You have to expand your network. You have to expand your knowledge of another offense. You have to get exposed to another conference. It's critical to move around a little bit when you're young to build your network out. And then, quite frankly, I'm so thankful that I went and did it, because, I got a chance to learn about power read. Got a chance to learn about zone read. At that time at NDSU, we were I formation, beat you up.
Right.
We're going to out tough you physically. We're coming straight at you. But Jordan Lynch was there. He was the number 3 guy in the Heisman voting.
Yeah.
We were doing a little bit of no huddle stuff. And so that was an amazing experience. I was only there 340 days before I came back.
Yeah, so a quick stint there. And honestly, I didn't line it up to that Jordan Lynch days, but the QB run stuff was unbelievable there at that point in time in Northern Illinois. So to be able to go sit in that room, learn that ball, have some success, expand your network, obviously is a huge W. So I'm going to ask you a tough question here. It's probably a good question for Coach Bohl if it plays out like this. I can't remember his timeline, but you do return this time as the OC. Do you think that you would have naturally elevated to OC if you just stayed there that other year, or was that exposure helpful for you? Obviously, it was helpful for you on the field, but do you think in terms of getting the job?
Wow, that's probably the best question I've ever had. I would say because Chris Kleiman and I stayed in touch when I was gone, and he was aware of the things that I was learning and the things that we were doing, from whether it's no huddle, some tempo things, just getting exposure to those things, right?
Yeah.
You can help the defense if you understand that.
Right.
I mean, I remember sharing with Chris, like, God, the only thing that's, bad about this no huddle thing is, like, Jordan Lynch is like a caged animal if he doesn't have the ball in his hand. If you got to keep him on the sideline, ball control and conversions, you keep those guys off balance that way. I think that Chris would have considered me or would have approached me to stay if I was here when they were all going to Wyoming.
Yeah.
And I probably would have had a good chance of getting it, but I think I was much more appealing. I was a much more appealing candidate to Chris because I had gone out and learned some new things.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the A-gap power. It wasn't just ISO. It wasn't just pin and pull out of the I formation. And so that's a really good question. And I honestly would lean towards the speed in which we did that. Right when the national title game was over, I was on the phone with Carson Wentz. Hey, man, are you ready to do it better than it's ever been done before?
Mm-hmm.
And Carson saying, hell yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think the speed of it would have been as fast as it was, which allowed us to help recruit Darius Shepard. it allowed us to help us recruit Lance Dunn, and I was able to get my boots on the ground and start recruiting. So I think the fact that I left was really important to Chris Kleiman as far as growth and learning and going and, learning some different things.
Yeah, that's awesome, Coach. I appreciate you sharing that. And kind of along the same lines, I'll make this story quick, but I played at Army for 1 year coming out of high school, and it was with Ty Berry, our former executive director, who was a mentor of mine, all that good stuff. This was one of the only few years that Army had got away from the triple option stuff, from some type of option. We were actually out there 5 wide, throwing the ball around. Obviously, not much success, and the fans did not like it. I mean, nobody that had been a part of that program really, they weren't big fans of it. I guess my question is, when you start changing it a little bit, because it did. I remember that point. I was coaching at that time when you cut the game on. I was like, oh dang, they're not under center. They're in shotgun. Wait, what's going on? How was the reaction to that when you start changing that stuff, and how confident were you walking in there saying, I know some good stuff is going to look a little different?
Two things actually happened in 2012. Yeah, we weren't necessarily in shotgun very much, but we had started running Brock Jensen. We always knew, okay, the tighter, the bigger the game, the better the people were. You weren't just going to be able to, play 8-on-9 football or 9-on-10 football. Those safeties got better, right? The extra fitter was starting to tackle us a little bit. I think initially, everybody was like, wow, this is cool, right? This is different. They're, jet power read, the passes that came off of it. But there probably was a moment in 2015 or 16 where the fans were like, okay, enough with the jet. Let's get in there and beat them up. And honestly, it always comes back to the blend. I think in those days, 14, 15, and 16, we were still probably 60-40 under center to gun.
Okay.
Well, you fast forward to now, or the last 4 years, it's probably 60-40 shotgun to under center. Yeah, so the evolution of those things and what fans become accustomed to. The bottom line is conversions, however you choose to run it. That leads to time of possession. That leads to ball control. And so our people here are pretty good football knowledge-wise, and that really has never changed. It's just kind of, the differences in how you do it. And we can get into some football things, but defensive fronts are so multiple now. They kind of, in some ways, if you get this, you got to do that. If you get in this, you got to do, some of that I formation stuff, you have to be pretty darn good up front.
Yeah.
In order to just hammer away at people.
Yeah. And once again, we typically just talk career trajectory. And I do want to say this from a football standpoint. It's almost to the point where I'm feeling like, obviously when I was in high school and probably the same for you, it was shotgun was unheard of almost. Obviously there were some people doing it, but typically everybody's under center, and it's transitioning now, as you mentioned. North Dakota State, South Dakota State, I'm sitting there watching South Dakota, I'm watching these games, and I'm like, dang, both of them are, threw the ball twice in a row. Like, what the heck is going on, right? And all of a sudden you look at it and like, teams line up in I formation and nobody knows what to do, and you just wonder, is it going to be cyclic like that? Kind of where people start maybe coming back and doing a little bit more more 22 personnel and just some things like that. But anywho, once again, just my thought process as I'm kind of seeing how football is going here. Now, one thing, I asked you the question about, people looking at all of a sudden now you're playing with tempo, doing some of these different things. But at the end of the day, the proof was in the pudding. 2014 FCS National Championships, 2015, their national championships with Carson Wentz, 5th straight national title. A lot of your career is at this point in time has ended with the big ring on your finger and the national championship trophy. I guess at these other stops that you made, do you get the opportunity to realize that there's some losing on the side of it, on the other side of this deal?
Yeah, there's some. We're trying to stay chronological, but we had a big year at Northern Illinois. We came up short, I think, in the MAC championship game, but to see Jordan Lynch rush for, I think it was 323, the next week 343, but we got beat in a bowl games. So basically the two biggest games of the year, you get beat, and that's hard to swallow after winning 2 national titles and kind of, an undefeated season in there. But, even at North Dakota State, every year we've kind of lost a game that we probably needed to lose in order to recenter and refocus. And that's what's so beautiful about a playoff or a tournament setting is that's okay, right? Like you can fail as long as you learn from it and move forward. But yeah, like, hey, listen, the job that Coach Bohl did at Wyoming, I hope he continues to get the credit he got, being 61-60. And basically the first 3 years there, the program was it wasn't an image of what Coach Bohl wanted, right? He was picking up, I think, a scholarship roster of like 15 or 16 receivers. Well, heck, he wanted 6 or 7 tight ends on scholarship. And so there's different places that have different challenges. We all have challenges. It's just a matter of how you negate those things, how you attack the challenges. But winning's not easy. I mean, this profession and different fan bases, understand, okay, 10 wins is pretty darn good. Here at North Dakota State, our goal and our objective every year, and kind of it's a must, right, that we get the national championship hoisted. Otherwise, we're kind of seen as a failure. We both know that that's not the case, right? As long as the team is competitive and is improvement driven, gets better all year, and tough as heck, and is being solid off the field, there's a lot of positives. But yeah, winning at some places is a lot harder than it is other places, and that's something that we need to not take for granted. It's very difficult. I mean, twice we had 39, 37 game winning streak here at North Dakota State, and you would have thought the sky was falling after we lost the game. Yeah. But really, it's just an opportunity to get another deal going.
Absolutely. Not that we need to spend a bunch of time on it, but I love the fact that you mentioned you lost some games that you needed to lose. Just real quick, for anybody that might not understand that, I know most ball coaches do, but some of these young guys might not get it. What do you mean by that?
Well, you get rocking along, 37 wins, and then South Dakota kicks a game-winning field goal, I think, in 2014. Carson Wentz, breaks his wrist, and you're able to go into the offensive room, and I'm telling you, that was an intense meeting. Because I remember saying, we're not slowing down. Everybody in this room needs to be 1% better. You better lock it in. Yeah. Okay, Easton Stick, this freshman kid here is going to play well. But, like, holy smokes, I remember going out to practice that night. You could have cut the focus, the intentional focus with a knife. And here we go, right? Like, Easton wins 8 games in a row. Carson comes back and does it. We lost to Youngstown State, one of my not favorite players, but one of the guys I have so much admiration for, came up here from Houston, DJ McNorton from Channelview, and he's coaching at Channelview now, and that is the same high school that the Eagles quarterback came from. Jalen Hurts, yeah. And he fumbled in a game against Youngstown State, so we lose a tight one, right? Well, I don't know if we had a running back fumble for the next 8 or 9, 10 weeks at all, right? So, like, those little things lock you in, and all of a sudden, you're winning at the rate we were winning at. Hang on now, guys. It's not that far from the outhouse to the penthouse. That's right. And when you let people hang around and you don't make them beat you and you turn the ball over, Indiana State 2012, they beat us. I think it was 14-0. We threw 2 pick sixes. I mean, the defense didn't give up a yard. And so those little things, I can remember a punt return in one of our tight games that was a loss, and we had bad lane integrity. And so those types of teachable moments sometimes are hurt a little bit better after failure than they are if you're winning and winning and winning.
Yeah, for sure, especially you lose some lane integrity on punt in week 7. Obviously, you lose that lane integrity in week 15. I mean, you're going home. And if it hits a little different, I appreciate you sharing that. Now, hopefully not a tough question here, but obviously you're rolling into the offensive coordinator role for the first time, and you win a national championship 3 times in a row. Everybody's not going to be that fortunate, but within yourself, I mean, there had to be some difficulties. There had to be some learning moments as a first-time OC. What were some of the challenges for you in that first year in 2014 as you kind of got acclimated to being a play caller?
I really think the philosophy and the way we were going to play was established. But I can remember way too many Mondays game planning meetings being way too long. You know, so the longer that I have moved on in my career, the one thing that I've learned is, you know, game planning for 10 hours isn't that much better than 8. You know, so having a clear vision for everybody of what everybody's doing on Sundays, what are they mastering, what are they bringing to the forefront for Mondays, is so critical so that we can keep moving along, so we can really get to the important stuff of, okay, what are the issues that they present for us, personnel-wise or defensive structure or blitz package on third downs. I wish I could go back to 14 and 15 and 16, and the two things I would probably do different is I would tighten down the amount of stuff we were carrying in the run game. So I think it's really important to have a run game coordinator. Okay, somebody that's responsible for these 20 to 28 calls. You know, we were probably carrying 48 calls at that time.
Yeah.
And thank God we had quarterbacks that could handle all the knowledge and the information. And then the second thing I would say is be much more diligent, like with third downs. There's no reason to carry 6 third downs in a section when you're only averaging 2.8 plays per game in that situation.
Yeah.
And so we could have been much tighter. That's probably the number one thing. And then, you know, okay, you go to Iowa, you get back to Wyoming, it was crystal clear, or you go to Wyoming, it was crystal clear to me, you know, coordinator roles and head coaches roles, they're much more about leadership than they are calling plays. You know, leadership of people, right? Leadership of the schedule, you know, laying down a schedule and earmarking certain points within certain days that things need to get done, and who's being held accountable for those things, who's taking ultimate responsibility. You know, the one thing I appreciate so much as younger coaches, you know, they all say, man, I want to be a coordinator. Oh, do you really?
Yeah.
Okay, devise a spring ball schedule.
Right.
You know, look at the installation. You know, all these things nobody wants to do. Everybody wants to be out in front and give the old speech and then call some plays. And then it's just, there's so much more to it, right? You're responsible for all the concepts you're running and situational stuff. Is it efficient? Is it not efficient? If it's not efficient, something I learned from Coach Bohl, how are you going to improve it, or are you throwing it out? Well, those are some big boy decisions when you're talking about a concept that you've run for 12 years.
Yeah.
You know, and I kind of just went to my head. I'm thinking right now where we're at, you know, the power play and the gap scheme runs are still really important to us, but a lot harder to do out of shotgun with an RPO, or a lot harder to do if you're not in 22 or 21 personnel, conversely, versus 12 or 11, you know. So there was a lot of good learning moments, but those are the two things I would have probably done differently.
That's awesome. Now, kind of same situation here. You're having some great success, and then in 2017, you go and have a great run at Iowa. What led to that? Obviously, you got the opportunity to coach for one of the greats in the profession. I'm sure a lot of what you do in your program is kind of around that as well. But what led you to take that opportunity there at Iowa?
Well, you know, it was interesting, right? Like, because in 16 we come up short, so it's obviously it's not a year that you want to leave North Dakota State on when you don't finish the job. But we had beaten Iowa that year, and
okay.
Iowa had some transition going on. You know, a coordinator was set to retire. 2 position coaches were going to be kind of on the move. And so when my phone rang, it was Coach Ferentz, and, you know, hey, I don't know where this is going to go. I remember him talking about that, but we want you to come down here for a pretty lengthy interview. This is going to be a wide open deal. You're going to have to earn it. And that interview process is actually, we do some of the things that I did on that interview because it was so thorough and it was just unbelievable experience. But I kind of interviewed from a coordinator standpoint. I answered a lot of O-line questions, you know, how we were doing things here. But I really was interviewing from a running backs and tight end standpoint. And it was just fascinating. And so the reason I always wanted to coach in the Big Ten. You know, I'm from Wisconsin. When I think about North Dakota State, quite frankly, the next thing that comes to my mind is Big Ten style, Big Ten, Big Ten academics, Big Ten culture, Big Ten approach. Our trademarking is very straightforward, like an Iowa or a Wisconsin or a Michigan. And so when I got that opportunity, I was going to go after it full steam. And it was cool because it ends up being the O-line job. Well, for a lot of people, that's hard for them to wrap their head around. Iowa wasn't necessarily interested in hiring an offensive line coach. They were interested in hiring a football teacher.
Yeah.
Because they had, these are the 4 run drills. These are the 5 pass pro drills. Tim, every day you're coaching these things every single day. They're very much a fundamental-based program, development of NFL-type players. But they do not do a whole lot. And I've taken a lot of those things and actually applied them to our program here. And I'm not saying it was easy, but once I learned those drills and I learned the coaching points, I was coaching the O-line, and then schematically, I was in a good position with the amount of offense that we were running here, that I could learn it and teach it and then go recruit. And so unbelievable 4 years. I'm so grateful of Coach Ferentz and that staff and the way that they do things, the how, not the what they do, but the how they do it. And it was perfect timing coming off of Coach Bohl and then Chris Kleiman, and right into this fundamental idea of hit and repeat on habits and how to carry yourself and what fundamentals need to be laid down.
Yeah. What's interesting as I'm sitting here listening to you tell this, because obviously I put these balls together and I know who you're working for, but it doesn't click to me. And then all of a sudden I'm sitting here listening like, God dang, you just got the opportunity to work for some of the absolute best in the business. You know what I mean? And not that there's not other good coaches out there, but you take a different job. I mean, even things for you personally can all of a sudden end up significantly different, without some of the toolage you're able to get from some of these guys. Just real quick, you coached Tyler Linderbaum, starting center for the Ravens, finalist for the Remington Trophy in 2020. Tristan Wirfs, he's a starting tackle for the Bucks, 2019 Big O Lineman of the Year, 2019 Holiday Bowl champs, fewest sacks allowed in the Big Ten, with 1.8 a game, 2017 Pinstripe Bowl champs. I mean, so just kind of a heck of a run there. And I mean, let me do the math here real quick. You got starting your coach career in 2003 and 17. So in 14 years, you had never coached O-line. You played quarterback. Your first exposure to this position, and then you had this tremendous amount of success. Obviously, it helps having some good players, but to be able to tool them right. How did you clinic? How did you? I mean, that's an important position. I mean, most of the time, this is the most important offensive position in many ways. Man, how did you get ready to do that? Because that's a big taking on.
It's kind of interesting because it goes all the way back to 06 and 7 and 8. I spent a lot of time with Pat Perlis, who was our old coordinator, but he was the offensive line coach.
Oh, yeah.
When he would go speak, I was the GA, I was the young coach that would go along with him. And so I was always fascinated with the position. I always paid attention. I kind of, not that it came natural or this, that, or the other thing, but I kind of always gravitated towards it. And then, Connor Riley, right, who's now the Dallas Cowboys O-line coach. I learned a lot from him. Scott Fuchs at NDSU, he's at the Titans now. I was with Rod Carey, who's an O-line guy at Northern Illinois. And so I do think I entered the position with a passion about it. I do think I entered the position, the coaching the O-line with a baseline, a pretty good foundation. And then again, I think it was an advantage that I had seen the game from running backs, quarterbacks, receivers. And then it was so helpful to have not only Coach Ferentz, but Brian Ferentz is an O-line guy.
Yeah.
I had 2 unbelievable offensive O-line assistants. Dylan Samura is now our O-line coach here, who went to, Tennessee State, Northern Michigan, but he was my assistant. And then I also had Joe Pavlik, who just went from North Dakota to Montana to Western Michigan. And so we had a really good support system. And so anytime I had a question, I could run out of the office and is a trio versus this the same as this versus that?
Yeah.
Yep, Tim, right on it. Tim, just keep doing what you're doing. And then Coach Ferentz, it was interesting. I'd get to my office in the morning and there'd be a sticky note on my desk or on my door that would say, hey, make sure their hands are up in pass pro, or their first steps need to be better, or our vertical leverage need to be better. So he just had a really cool way about not only giving a little bit of guidance that was comfortable, but he was right there. If he was on the left side of the field, I was going to go on the right side, because he was still pretty proactive in helping out.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned those players. I mean, shoot, those are two guys that are on Hall of Fame tracks right now. Yeah. Tristan Wirfs, the highest paid guy ever, and made All Pro on both sides. And then Tyler Linderbaum, man, what a fighter. I think Grace Abel has a lot of his traits and qualities. Kid that's going in the draft for us this year, but it was unique because I got hired. I want to share this with you. I got hired because we basically had three seniors and two juniors, and we were going to have an All-American type center. James Daniels got drafted in the second round. Well, those two tackles went down within the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, the seniors. Tristan Wirfs has to go as a true freshman, and Elric Jackson, people don't mention him, but he just got paid by the Rams, and he's their starting left tackle.
Oh, wow.
They had to play as true freshmen. And so now Coach Bohl, Coach Ferentz, I remember him tapping me on the shoulder and, all right, now you got to coach him.
Yes. That's right.
But man, that was, another great moment for me in trying to get fresh tackles ready to go in the Big Ten. The biggest learning point that I had in my college football career is the pass rushers can be extremely different at that level.
Mm-hmm. You see the difference in levels at that point. Maybe not a skill position at times, right? But in the trenches for sure, right?
Man, you get some Jeffrey Simmons and Sweat were on that Mississippi State team, and Abrams. They had 3 first-rounders on that defense when we played those guys in the bowl game. And Jeffrey Simmons, I mean, he looked like Tristan Wirfs, but running a lot faster. And man, was he a good 3-tech. We had issues blocking him that day.
Well, you said something that was important. You said they were looking for teachers, and at the end of the day, if you could teach, you can coach any position out there, man. And clearly, you proved that. Now let's get back to it. And this part of the story earlier, it kind of struck a nerve with me. In my decade of coaching, I had to have a tough conversation or two where it's a guy I like or respect, but I want to go explore a different job. And I know how tough that can be when it's somebody you love and care for, and they've taken care of you. So you had that conversation with Coach Bohl, at this point in time, probably about 6 or 7 years ago, where you walked in to take that Northern Illinois job. And I could tell by the way you told it, it was tough for you probably to, just to go and have that dialogue. But anyways, you get a call back from him. He's the head coach at the University of Wyoming. How did that go down, and how did you guys reunite?
Yeah, that's an interesting deal because 4 years of being the O-line coach at Iowa. 4 years at Iowa. We're coming off of COVID. I just, in my heart, in my mind, I believed I had to make a choice. Was I going to go down this O-line road? Right. I think that would have led to some really, really cool things.
Yeah.
Number one, the opportunity just to stay at Iowa for a long time, right? Like, there's not a better man in the business than Coach Ferentz, and it's just everything there. You stay in your lane, right, and you operate, man. It's a great place to work. Coach Ferentz is supportive, but on the other side of things was this kind of all of a sudden wanting to coordinate,
yeah.
And it wasn't the play calling. It wasn't the play calling. It was wanting to lead, and honestly, wanting to lead the offensive room and have a voice. And I thought I could do more. I thought I could make a bigger impact than being a position coach. And I started having that burning desire again. But quite frankly, Brent Vegan was going to Montana State, so I knew that job was going to be open. And so it just kind of starts with Coach Bohl reaching out, wanting to have a small conversation. And then, within hours, right, in our profession, it's like, well, Tim, why don't you give this some real consideration? We're about to have you. So now you got to go into Coach Ferentz's office. And the thing I appreciated most about Coach Ferentz in that talk, a little bit different than Coach Bohl.
Yeah.
Coach Ferentz had been a head coach at this time for 22 years. And, has lost plenty of coaches. He knew for me, okay, based on us getting to know each other and the relationship we had, it wasn't about money. And so he was doing everything he could to hold back. Hey, next year, you know, you're going to get a substantial increase. He just was really respectful. And, you know, we just had a conversation of where, you know, I was at in my mindset. He didn't make any guarantees or any promises about what could happen there at Iowa or if I'd be considered. He said, you know, right now you're the offensive line coach and Brian's the coordinator. They're, you know, we want you to be our O-line coach and we want you here. But if you really want to lead, I think this is something you should look at because you know Coach Bohl. You know the situation there. You're familiar with how he operates. If it wasn't that case, Tim, he goes, I would tell you to stay, but this one's on you. You're going to have to make a decision. And I remember leaving, I don't know, 10:30 maybe in the morning, and I drove around in my car making some calls until about 2 o'clock. I had one more meeting with Brian Ferentz. It got really sticky and it got difficult. And honestly, I'm grateful that I went to Wyoming because getting to coach the quarterback again and then having to recruit to a school that's, you know, okay, West Coast in conference, Midwest in some values, location. I mean, I really had to sharpen up my skills to find out who was really interested in coming to Laramie because that's a so unique deal up there. You really got to want to be there. It's got to mean a lot to you, you know, education, the teammates have to rally. And so I learned a lot about my presentation skills again in recruiting. I learned a lot about what kind of kid goes here to goes there. And it was really fascinating to get the opportunity to travel most of America to recruit quarterbacks and evaluate those guys. So again, I don't like interviewing somebody that says, hey, I just want to come to NDSU so I can learn and grow. We're looking for people that can impact our culture. We're looking for people that can move us forward. Yeah. Meanwhile, the whole time we have a improvement, a learning attitude that we want to do that constantly in our career. And that move there was awesome. And to play some of those people and to play in some of those big games and to do the things that we did, we went to 3 straight, you know, bowl games and had some success. And that last year, man, we should have won 10 games. And we just offensively, we just did not put our hands up and fight UNLV. Otherwise, we would have capped off, I think, the second or third time in Wyoming's history of winning 10 games.
Yeah. I mean, it was an awesome opportunity there at Wyoming and a very unique conference. You're talking about the recruiting aspect of it, but the conference within itself. I mean, you're in Cali, you're in Idaho, you're in Hawaii, in Las Vegas, all within the course of 4 weeks. Is kind of a and honestly, it looks like most of the conference kind of shifting to that type of style anyways, just the way everything is moving right now. But Mountain West has been doing this for a while, in that very, very unique situation. And then kind of everything comes full circle, right? You get the opportunity. Coach Bohl comes and joins us here as the executive director at the AFCA. You get a new journey as well as the head ball coach there at NDSU. Once again, how did that go down? Why were you the guy for them to pick?
Well, it's interesting because initially when the job opened, I knew there was a chance, right? Whether Coach Sawville got the job or somebody new got the job at Wyoming, that I was going to have a chance to stay there. But at the start of the North Dakota thing, North Dakota State job, it was interesting because I was probably more a fan and more just supportive of whatever decision, whoever they were going to consider, that I would be in full support of it. Almost becoming one of those guys that had been at NDSU for 10 years, and I was in support of whatever direction they wanted to go. But then when the opportunity arose, truly were, okay, this is an open, fight for the job, and I interviewed, I had realized, man, I was not ready in 2017. After Chris Kleiman went to K-State, I interviewed at NDSU, and I was just a fragment of what I was, 7 or 8 years later. And so I had learned and grown so much, the Mountain West, right? Travel, recruiting, playing in sticky, tough, hard games where you're not the favorite every week, right? Getting to play against an Air Force in that type of game, playing, a really good Boise State team. Some of the stuff that we went through at Iowa with some transition some team things. I mean, man, I felt so ready to have a chance to interview and talk with the president about big, president type issues.
Yeah.
And how do you attack things like diversity and inclusion? Do you have some thoughts on, discipline? At that time, I had finally cultivated those strategies and those philosophies, and man, it takes some time. I wish I was sharper or could learn it faster, and you could be a head coach at 34 years old and be one of these guys. But it took me a little bit of time, and when I got the opportunity to interview, it was. And I'll share this: that NDSU is one of the only head coaching jobs at the mid-major level that I would have pursued hard. Otherwise I may have went after a position coaching job at whatever level that, somebody would have been interested in hiring me. And I say that because I knew NDSU's foundation and their footing and what the community and what the administration believes that what good football looks like and what a good team looks like. We want to recruit high school student athletes as much as we can here.
Yeah.
We're trying to do everything we can not to be 50-50 with the portal or 1/3 portal. We will recruit some portal guys, but we want to be a high school development operation. That's who I am.
Yeah.
That's who I want to be. And so I knew North Dakota State would provide a pretty good opportunity to do that.
I want to hit on this, and this is kind of a question that's been kind of building up here, I guess, over the last probably 6 or 7 podcasts I've done. But we're about 400 podcasts in this deal. I'm talking to coaches all over the place, head ball coaches, young guys, whatever. And I see that a lot of head coaches, they are like, man, I interviewed for this situation and it didn't pan out. But I'm sitting here now and I'm realizing I wasn't ready. And sometimes in that moment, it's easy to be bitter. Like, man, that should have been my job. That's pretty interesting. That obviously we didn't talk about that part. I didn't know that you interviewed for that job in 17. And in the moment, I'm sure there's some frustration, some disappointment, and all that kind of stuff. But then you realize you didn't know what you didn't know until you know it, right? I don't know what the question really is, but what's the importance, I guess, of patience in this whole deal?
Yeah, patience, fit, commonalities. Gosh, one thing I've learned, it's been only 400 days on the job. We're coming up on our second spring. Man, connectivity and wanting to be connected to the athletic director, the associate athletic director, you working hand in hand with the collective, working hand in hand with our team makers. I mean, those things are so critical in those relationships. Well, if personality-wise, I think it would be a real struggle if you're really far removed from, how the president is seeing the university, how the athletic director is seeing the athletics program. So I don't know if it's necessarily patience, but, making good, sound decisions for you and your wife, or you and your wife and your family, or for your staff members, if you're a head coach that's moving around.
Yeah.
This is kind of, us coaches, we ain't much different than the players. We can't get on a podcast and complain about the portal and be guys that are just bouncing around.
Yeah, sure enough.
For a few extra bucks. To me, like, philosophy and demeanor of the program and temperament of the program, is physicality at the forefront, is having a physical program that, loves to practice, that practices well, is so critical to me, and it's so important to me. Not that I would never look at trying to build that or reestablish a way of doing things, but man, that can be a challenge if you're not lockstep with the people that are important as far as connectivity and the vision for the whole school, the vision for the athletics department. I mean, too many guys, like I said, jump at things and whether it's being unprepared or don't hire the right supporting cast for their personality or their knowledge base. It can be short-term parking, man. You're on the move.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Coach, I would love to dive in on how you hired and all, your philosophy and how you changed and all that kind of stuff. But obviously, I know an hour of time is man, I'm grateful for that. But I did want to ask you, you were able to step into this program and win a national championship. And very, very unique, right? You won a championship as an assistant coach, won a championship as a coordinator, and then got to win a championship as a head coach. It's probably somebody's done that before, but typically it's probably all in one stint as they elevated through. But you were there, you left for a little bit, kind of sharpen your tools a little bit more. You come back as an OC, leave, sharpen your tools a little bit with Coach Ferentz and that staff, and now Coach Bohl at Wyoming, and you come back as a head coach. What does it mean for you to be in that chair that you sat in about 20 years ago now? Like you said, it was halfway done, and you're interviewing with Coach Bohl in a busted up room. It's not quite finished, and now you're sitting there as the head ball coach, just coming off a national championship, trying to go do this thing again. What does it mean to you?
Well, I guess I could go down a couple different avenues with that, but it's an honor and a privilege to be the head football coach at North Dakota State University. I take a lot of pride in looking how to make things better each and every day, but to carry out some of the thought process and the attack process of not only Craig Bohl, but Chris Kleiman and Matt Entz, they all won national championships, and
right.
To win it in the first year is really special, right? Kind of to put us back on top, and to beat a really good Montana State team. You do some reflecting the last month and a half, and I just kind of circle back to, I have a responsibility here to make sure we're as good as we possibly can be. But honestly, every time I sit down, it's nice to be up here working when the rest of the staff is taking a little break on spring break with their families. And I always come back to one thing, I got to sign up here, treat a person as he is and he'll remain as he is, treat him as he could be and he'll become what he should be. But it's an honor and a privilege to be the head coach at North Dakota State. And that's how I truly feel. This championship was special. It was one of our five that I've been part of. It was the first time that it was a sense of accomplishment rather than a sense of relief. And we're trying to hold on to that with our leadership council right now and our coaching staff. It's really important that you celebrate winning. This is no small feat, and it's hard to do.
Absolutely.
And we should enjoy it.
That's powerful, Coach. Well, before I let you go, man, I want to ask you this last question here. Following this national championship season, you were voted regional coach of the year by the AFCA. I think this is special, not because you won an award, but more because it's voted on by your peers, guys that see you walk in year one and come and do a heck of a job with that program. What does that mean to you to win this, this award by the AFCA, voted on by your peers?
Well, to get recognition by the AFCA anytime you're part of the AFCA, whether it's conversations and you're a valued member, I mean, there's a lot of that's a good feeling, right? There's a sense of accomplishment. I would be remiss if I didn't say how I really feel about individual awards. That's a staff award. Yeah. You need real strong leadership from your coordinators. Man, you need leadership. You need job well done from your football operations guy, and you need great guidance from your athletic department. So I think it's a representation of North Dakota State football, specifically our football staff, and it's an honor. I remember looking at this stuff, being like, someday maybe I can get into a position where, your staff gets recognized, and you're the guy in front of it. And so I'm really appreciative, and like I said, I don't take it lightly when you're recognized by the AFCA or there's a meeting and your opinion is valued. We need more coaches, I think, that are thinking that this is a big deal. This association matters. We're caretakers of this game. The coaches are.
That's right.
And we shouldn't get wrapped up in any more than just that. Let's keep this game great. Let's keep it moving forward. And I really appreciate being on here today.
Yeah, Coach. Well, we appreciate you, man. Thanks for everything that you do for this profession, your involvement here with the AFCA. And I'm wishing you the best. You gained a heck of a fan today, man. I'm excited to keep up with you in your journey, okay?
Yeah, look forward to next time. Appreciate you.
All right, thanks, Coach.
CoachComm has been delivering tough headsets for tough teams for more than 31 years. It's why 97% of FBS teams and thousands of high schools across the country rely on CoachComm. Get the best for your team. Visit CoachComm.com for more info.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Headset, presented by CoachComm. If you'd like to learn more about this week's episode, head over to AFCA.com. There, you can access every episode and find corresponding show notes. Remember, you can catch every episode of Inside the Headset, presented by CoachComm, on wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. While you're there, we'd love for you to take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Your feedback helps us improve and grow. Keep up with the latest news by following us on social media. Connect with us at Inside the Headset, and remember to tag us when you share your favorite episodes. For more updates on all things AFCA, be sure to follow the @WeAreAFCA social media accounts. If you're not a part of the AFCA community yet, visit AFCA.com to join thousands of NFL, college, and high school coaches nationwide and across the globe. Elevate your coaching game with an AFCA membership. You'll gain exclusive access to the annual AFCA convention, magazine, digital library, and AFCA Insider email. Stay up to date with the latest stories and news on the AFCA website. More than just a convention, the AFCA offers continuous education, guidance, networking, and more. Celebrate the past and shape the future with the AFCA. It's about fostering exceptional coaches who create outstanding teams and even better individuals. Invest in your skills and make a lasting impact today by engaging with the AFCA. Your journey starts here.